Good evening, everybody. 52 days now until President-elect Trump's inauguration, and the transition team is under attack from all corners, it seems, perhaps even from within. Much of the recent sniping concerns Mr. Trump's potential choice of Secretary of State. Today, saying he was, quote, very impressed after meeting with retired General, former CIA Director David Petraeus at Trump Tower this afternoon. And Mitt Romney, apparently still on some sort of short list, the transition team announcing Mr. Trump will meet for a second time with Romney tomorrow. Every indication is that meeting will be over dinner. And senior advisor Kellyanne Conway today said she's already shared her feelings about Romney privately with Mr. Trump. She publicly questioned Romney's credentials and his loyalty to Trump this past weekend.
People feel betrayed to think that Governor Romney, who went out of his way to question the character and the intellect and the integrity of Donald Trump, now our president-elect, would be given the most significant cabinet post of all, Secretary of State. And that is a decision that only one man can make. President-elect Donald Trump. I will respect it and I will support it 1,000%. But I'm reflecting what the grassroots are saying.
And the president-elect addressing the desperate recount effort launched by Green Party presidential candidate Dr. Jill Stein and joined over the weekend by the Hillary Clinton campaign. Trump tweeted this: Hillary Clinton conceded the election when she called me just prior to the victory speech and after the results were in. Nothing will change. We'll talk about these continued attacks on Trump and critical cabinet choices ahead with former Reagan White House political director Ed Rollins, RNC Rules Committee member Randy Evans, and among my guests tonight, Oversight Committee member Congressman Mark Meadows, and a prominent governor now echoing Mr. Trump's concerns over sanctuary cities. Tonight we'll be joined by the governor of the great state of Texas, Greg Abbott. He's here, and he is pledging to ban cities protecting illegal immigrants in his state and vowing to cut the funding of sanctuary cities. Governor Abbott with us to talk about his plan and the growing number of Democratic mayors and police chiefs who plan to defy the president and the law. Also today, the FBI now investigating whether there are any ties to terrorists after a harrowing incident at Ohio State University. A Somali refugee, a student there, plowed his car into a campus crowd. He jumped out and then began stabbing people with a butcher knife before he was shot and killed by police officers. We'll talk with the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Zuhdi Jasser, joins us here tonight. And our top story, Vice President-elect Governor Mike Pence leaving Trump Tower just moments ago, and he said this, saying very important announcements would be coming soon. The governor being somewhat cryptic these days, but certainly knows how to form a tease today, saying to the press, buckle up. And the battle over Secretary of State becoming somewhat contentious. Trump meeting with General David Petraeus today and Governor Romney tomorrow. The RNC chairman and Trump's choice to be chief of staff has been trying to downplay all these reports of struggles within the transition.
It isn't a matter of warfare. I mean, there's a lot of opinions about this, and yes, it is a sort of a team of rivals concept if you were to go toward the Governor Romney concept. But I think that should tell all Americans about where President-elect's head's at, which is a place that will put the best possible people together for all Americans.
Speaking of rivals or enemies, Hillary Clinton's campaign now participating in a recount process that gets underway in Wisconsin this week. Election commissioners today rejected Green Party candidate Jill Stein's request for a hand recount of Trump's victory. Instead, local clerks will be deciding how best to recount starting this Thursday. They have to finish by December 13th under federal law. In Pennsylvania, Stein filed a lawsuit today asking a judge for a statewide recount despite missing a number of deadlines, that deadline the 21st in a number of the counties there. Stein unable to get the required 3 voters from each of the state's more than 9,000 voting precincts to submit an affidavit requesting a recount. Now, Stein has until Wednesday to file for a Michigan recount. If approved, Trump gets 7 days to object and to contest it. And here we go. Well, joining me now, member of the RNC Rules Committee, chairman of the Republican National Lawyers Association, former senior advisor to Newt Gingrich and his presidential campaign in 2012, Randy Evans. Randy, good to have you with us tonight. And Great America PAC strategist, former Reagan White House political director, veteran of 10 presidential campaigns, and he's just getting started, folks. Ed Rollins, good to have you both.
Nice to be with you.
Let's start, Randy, with these recounts. Donald Trump says they won't amount to anything. Your judgment?
They're not going to amount to anything. I was there in the Bush v. Gore when we actually dealt with a real electoral college issue, which is whether or not by December 19th the votes cast in Florida would be counted when the Congress came together in a joint session to count the electoral votes. And that was much different. Here, the electoral college will meet on December 19th. The ballots will be cast. When the Congress convenes on January 6th, they will open the ballots and count them. Donald Trump will be well north of 270 electoral votes, and that'll be the end of it. And so all of this is really pretty elaborate fundraising mechanism to try to elevate name profile, to actually try to create a false hope that something different might happen. But the bottom line is,
is it the Democratic Party that needs the money most, or is it Jill Stein? She seems to be rolling in dough.
I think it's the Democratic Party. I think they are absolutely destitute. They've lost at every level, in the House, in the Senate, in gubernatorial elections, in local elections. Their coffers are dry. They need some rallying point, and this false hope that somehow they could overtake the election is the only hope they have, and you and I both know it's a failing hope. It's one that has absolutely no merit whatsoever to it. I've been through it. It's not going to happen. December 19th, ballots cast, it's over.
And I presume you agree?
Totally. Well, he's the expert. I obviously always respect.
I hate it when you guys start deferring to each other because you're both so doggone smart and know so much.
In this particular case, there's not going to be a 1,000-vote differential today if you did all 3 states. I mean, it's just not going to happen. This is all done. And why they're doing this is foolish. It makes her look very petty. It makes her people look like sore losers, and I think to a certain extent they are.
Well, and
I think it's an abdication of really her role in going forward in the Democratic Party. Really, now the Democrats have to search for a new standard bearer. And it can't be Barack Obama because he's forfeited that by the way he's conducted himself since the election. And now Hillary Clinton is literally forfeiting that right because she's unwilling to live by
How about for the past 8 years, for crying out loud?
No, I agree. But even then, he could have left as a president who said, I'm going to follow the standard of George Bush, and I'm going to be bigger than the process. He chose not to do that.
Yeah. And Barack Obama, the standard bearer, this has to be, for the Democrats, a generational year, 2017, in which they turn to new leadership, perhaps earlier than that in the House.
The problem is they don't have any new leadership, and I think to a certain extent the old leadership stayed around too long, and Obama was an absolute miserable failure for 8 years. So my sense is you can put a hat and pull hats names out of the hat and find the next leader. So
enough with Democrats. Let's turn to the transition team. And what you make of Kellyanne Conway's comments about Mitt Romney, what you make of the president-elect inviting Governor Romney to dinner. First you, Randy.
Well, I'll join with Speaker Newt Gingrich and think it's a horrible mistake. Just think about the optics. You go to the New York Times and you say, if you say untrue, mean-spirited things about me, there will be consequences. And then you turn to somebody who did that and say, the consequence is you may get to be the State Department secretary. There's just, all you've done is open up Pandora's box to say, there really is no penalty to being disloyal. There really is no penalty to attacking me at the most personal, basic level. Now, the moment you permit that, you just literally create the option to say, you have a cabinet who can attack you at every turn without consequence and with the potential for a promotion.
Ed, what do you think?
Well, I've said this before, as anybody else was saying, and I'm not a Romney guy, and I don't buy the team of rivals. He was not a rival. This was a guy, if he'd done that race, he'd have been blown out early, just like everybody else. He stuffed his toe in the water, and
he was an enemy.
And he basically, as the former nominee of this party, there were a lot of us that supported him 4 years ago and didn't particularly enthusiastically, but we did. And I think at the end of the day, he had an obligation to support Trump somewhere along the line, and he didn't support him, and he trashed him. So I'm totally opposed to this. I think Kellyanne is representing the grassroots, and Newt does also. I can just tell you the PAC people who've given us money are calling us and basically objecting strenuously to Romney.
And, you know,
but Lou,
go ahead.
Lou, I was just going to say, notice what was missing. You would have thought that after having been granted that first interview, you would have seen Mitt Romney go to a microphone, repudiate his remarks, apologize, and say, I will be a team player. But did you hear that, Lou? At any point, did you ever hear him come forward and basically say, I was wrong, but I'm willing to make amends? You haven't heard it, and when you can't hear that, that's what you need in order to have a loyal cabinet member.
Well, I'll confess my expectations of the governor are so reduced and so low that I would not have had the same anticipation as you. It's tempting to construct this as Donald Trump was something of a twofer. He gets to play Governor Romney. He gets to play the national media, principally left wing in all cases, and that sort of tickles me to think about it.
Well, he also gets to show off some extraordinary people. I think one of the great things about this is he's highlighted some outstanding military leaders. They're 3 4-star generals. Petraeus.
I tell you what, I'm all in for Mattis. I'm going to say it right now.
I'm for Mattis, and being perfectly honest,
I don't care what the job is. He gets it.
I'm more than happy as an old street fighter to let Petraeus and Romney go out in the back alley, and whichever one comes out gets to be Secretary of State. And then Rudy could take the other one on too.
Yeah, I mean, Rudy and Mattis would be a pretty strong pair to draw to.
Absolutely.
You do agree, Randy, right?
I do, and I think it does tell you a little bit about how quickly things pivot here. Well, just look at what happened with the passing of Fidel Castro. Barack Obama speaks for the past.
You know what? I love the fact the president-elect of the United States said of a communist. By the way, how many people even say communist when they talk about him?
I do.
A communist damn dictator is dead. And with that, I have to wrap it up. Randy, thanks for being with us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Ed Rollins, thank you. Appreciate it,
Thank you.
as always. We're coming right back. Much more straight ahead. Please stay with us. Hillary and Dr. Jill Stein seeking a recount of their losses.
I think the American people know this is a waste of everyone's time and money. This is a total and complete distraction and a fraud.
We'll take up the left's attempted assault against our electoral system. And Governor Greg Abbott to ban sanctuary cities in the great state of Texas. Will other governors follow his lead? Governor Greg Abbott joins me here next. You don't want to miss it. Much more straight ahead. We're coming right back. Stay with us. The governor of the great state of Texas, Greg Abbott, has declared he will sign a law banning sanctuary cities. He's already issued an order that cuts funding to those sanctuary cities. There are now an estimated 6 million illegal immigrants living in some 400 jurisdictions across the country, labeled sanctuary policies. In those jurisdictions, Trump already forced to take on nearly a dozen mayors and police chiefs from New York to San Francisco who have vowed not to cooperate with either the president, federal agencies, or the law. Joining me now is Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Governor, it is great always to have the opportunity to talk with you. We welcome you, and your order cutting off funding to those sanctuary cities. What has been the reaction in Texas?
Well, Lou, this is very simple, and that is we are a nation of laws, and it's time for our cities, our counties, all elected officials to follow those laws. We've seen here, even in Texas, like you've seen in some other parts of America, where some local officials are saying that they are not going to enforce the law. And so I'm being abundantly clear. I don't care what jurisdiction you're at in the state of Texas, you are going to comply with the law. And so I've already issued a governor's order cutting off funding from the governor's office that was going to some of these jurisdictions. But secondly, we're going to pass a ban on sanctuary cities in the state of Texas that will put real teeth in this, compelling local officials to apply the law of the United States of America.
Isn't it incredible in the 21st century that we have to talk about enforcing the law as if somehow that was a volitional consideration when our chief executives, whether federal or state, take an oath of office, or in the case of a sanctuary city, a mayor.
Right, and even more amazing is you have some people in some media come out and criticize those who simply want to enforce the law that's on the books. But to see some elected officials get up and say that they are going to willfully not apply the law, that's contrary to American principles, and it's contrary to what we will establish here in the state of Texas. But remember this also, Lou, and that is this is not just a story about Kate Steinle. Texas has had several people killed at the hands of people who have been going in and out of the immigration system here in the state of Texas. Earlier this year, a man named Welton Betts was killed by someone who had been repeatedly deported out of the state of Texas back into Mexico, who killed him and went on a crime rampage across the state. We're not going to sacrifice the lives of our fellow Texans at the hands of people who are here illegally.
Yeah, and good for you. And I know the citizens of Texas have got to be just grateful to you for taking this action. And I want to just say to you, because as an attorney general, you were remarkable. As a governor, you're already remarkable. In case I haven't made it clear, I'm a fan of Governor Abbott's, folks. He is one of the greatest public officials in the country. But I struggle, and I know lots of people do, to understand why there is this volition around laws. I mean, you can't pray in a school. You can't pledge allegiance in some schools. You've got to follow all these dicta from Washington, or in the case of public education. But you don't have to worry about the federal law if you want to smoke pot in various places and you pass a state law, which is supposed to be subservient to federal law. I mean, can you just explain that to us, how we've gotten to this point?
Well, what you described, Lou, is really pretty much the definition of anarchy. When people can decide which laws they will follow and which laws they will not follow, that means it's every man for himself under the legal system. That's not the way the United States was constructed. That's not what we will allow to happen either in Texas or across the country. We are a nation of laws. People are expected to follow the laws and law enforcers. And
Jeff Sessions, Senator Sessions, to be the Attorney General of the Trump administration. How pleased are you with that choice?
It'll be a game changer. As you know, I've been battling back against the current Attorney General, U.S. Attorney General, as well as her predecessor and Eric Holder. And we've had all these challenges, all these fights because of the refusal to enforce the law or the way they're applying the law in the state of Texas. And it's going to be a breath of fresh air when we have a person who is committed to the United States Constitution, who's committed to the rule of law running the United States Department of Justice.
Governor, great to talk with you. Thanks for making time, and look forward to our next opportunity. Governor Greg Abbott.
Thank you, Lou.
Thanks so much. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, do you believe the establishment is having far too great an influence on the Trump transition team? What do you think? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. We'd like to hear from you. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. And on Wall Street, stocks pulling back a little after last week's big rally, easing just a little. The Dow down 54 points, the S&P down 12, the Nasdaq down 30. Volume on the big board, 3.5 billion shares. That, I think we could call that moderate trading levels. President-elect Trump finding support for his economic plans from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The organization says his policies, his economic policies, could double U.S. economic growth in the next 2 years. What about that? And a reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Up next, the Trump transition team slamming the hypocrisy from the left over their push for a recount in 3 states.
Their president, Barack Obama, is going to be in office for 8 more weeks, and they have to decide whether they're going to interfere with him finishing his business or if they're going to be a bunch of crybabies and sore losers about an election that they can't turn around.
And that is partly the subject of my commentary. Coming up next, please stay with us. Well, this recount stuff is quickly becoming Hillary and Jill's excellent adventure. So here we go. A scolding leftist and a usually cautious communist can't come to terms with their failures, demanding recounts now of votes in 3 states. They both failed not only in the election, although Hillary did, in all fairness, do orders of magnitude better than the 1%er, Dr. Stein. But neither of them has dazzled with their good sportsmanship or judgment, certainly. Some savants in the national left-wing media portray the two as still struggling to realize that they lost, to comprehend their ballot box bust ended badly. that they have made themselves so much smaller than they would have been were it not for their pitiful demands for recounts, or in Hillary's case, doing her leftist following a favor by participating in Dr. Stein's demand for recounts in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Clinton attorney and campaign attorney Mark Elias wrote this, quote, "We believe we have an obligation to the more than 64 million Americans who cast ballots for Hillary Clinton to participate in ongoing proceedings to ensure that an accurate vote count will be reported." Wow. Or in other words, they want to raise a little money. Yet here's what Hillary Clinton had to say during the third presidential debate last month about Donald Trump, were he not to accept the results of the election.
We've had free and fair elections. We've accepted the outcomes when we may not have liked them. And that is what must be expected of anyone standing on a debate stage during a general election. He is denigrating, he's talking down our democracy. And I, for one, am appalled.
Appalled she should be at her own and Jill Stein's unprincipled behavior, at their leftist zeal not to carry on their campaigns, not even to steal an election because their odds of doing so in full glare of attorneys and camera lights have diminished almost zero. No, the true purpose of the left here is to destroy our electoral system, the power and enforcement of our laws, and adherence to our nation's interests. Their object is to carry on their leftist assault on our very foundations, on our constitutional republic itself, to, as Barack Obama put it, to fundamentally transform this nation. President Obama failed, but he did great injury to millions of Americans, to perhaps an entire generation, and certainly attacked many of our most cherished values. The president-elect isn't waiting 52 days for his inauguration to begin the great effort to rebuild, to restore, and to make America great again. He has begun that effort by winning the presidency. And like the vast majority of Americans, I believe he wins the day. Our quotation of the evening, this one from Thomas Jefferson, who said, quote, "I was bold in the pursuit of knowledge, never fearing to follow truth and reason to whatever results they led, and bearding every authority which stood in the way." We're coming right back with much, much more. Stay with us. The Trump transition team seemingly assailed from all sides and possibly from within as well. The president-elect prepares to meet with Romney for a second time.
While we will support President-elect Trump in whatever he does, I think we would be enormously disappointed if he brought Mitt Romney in any position of authority.
Congressman Mark Meadows joins me here next on what appears to be the establishment's all-out effort to influence the Trump transition team. The White House today announcing President Obama and Vice President Biden will not attend the funeral of Fidel Castro. The president, under fire for his warm response to the death of the dictator, releasing a statement that reads in part, quote, "We know that this moment fills Cubans in Cuba and in the United States with powerful emotions, recalling the countless ways in which Fidel Castro altered the course of individual lives, families, and the Cuban nation. History will record and judge the enormous impact of this singular figure on the people and world around him." Mr. Obama failing to mention the tens of thousands that Castro killed and imprisoned. The president seemingly more focused on his own legacy rather than Castro's brutal legacy. The president, back in 2014, restored diplomatic relations with Cuba after more than 50 years of embargoes. The left also heaping praise on Castro. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau actually called Castro a remarkable leader. Dr. Jill Stein praised him as, quote, "a symbol of the struggle for justice in the shadow of empire." Are you kidding me? President-elect Trump, meanwhile, condemned Castro as a brutal dictator and has threatened to roll back relations with Cuba if the nation does not improve things for the Cuban people. Joining me now, Congressman Mark Meadows. He serves on both the House Oversight and Foreign Affairs Committees, a member of the Freedom Caucus. Great to have you with us, Congressman. I know you were, when I was talking about the Clinton campaign attorney, Elias, you saw something that sort of piqued your interest there.
Well, it did, Lou, and it's great to be with you, but it's that hypocrisy that you were talking about, because here is the Clinton attorney, Mark Elias, who's saying that we need to make sure that there's a recount in 3 states that Hillary Clinton and Jill Stein lost by an unbelievable margin. Yet that same attorney today is saying that the governor, McCrory of North Carolina, should give up when the vote count is less than 10,000. So the hypocrisy of it is unbelievable. We know that Jill Stein is a member of the Green Party. We're now starting to figure out what kind of green it's all about, and that's the hypocrisy.
Yeah, I think that the green, as I was talking with Randy Evans and Ed Rollins here earlier in the broadcast, Congressman, they're saying it straight up. The Democratic Party is out of money, and this is an effort to raise money, and that's the primary and perhaps sole purpose of the recount. I want to turn quickly to what you're watching here in Trump Tower, and that is, you can see, it seems, the real effort on the part of the establishment to insinuate itself into the transition team and the decision-making process of that team. Are you concerned at this point?
Well, I think all Americans are concerned because the deficit of trust in Washington, D.C. is at an all-time low, and they have hope that President-elect Donald Trump will make sure that we do indeed drain the swamps. I got a text just this morning from someone who was out door knocking for Donald Trump, and he sent me a text and he said, well, are they going to go with Romney and bypass Giuliani? I certainly hope not. I thought things were going to be different. That's the kind of thing that we need to fight back against. But I can tell you, Donald Trump has made outstanding picks for his cabinet. Yeah. I have faith in him that he'll do the right thing.
Yeah, I think we all do. And I do think there is also, as I suggested earlier in the broadcast, this could very well be a play on the part of Mr. Trump to kind of, well, to use Thomas Jefferson's words, to kind of beard Governor Romney and the national liberal media at the same time. Let's turn to the leadership of the House and where we're going there. Ryan makes a lot of noises like he thinks this is the better way agenda and not President-elect Trump's agenda. Am I misinterpreting the good speaker?
Well, I can tell you that the people spoke on November 8th, and if anybody were to suggest that the Better Way agenda was driving the American agenda, that wouldn't be the case. I can tell you, though, that particular agenda, the Better Way, as it dovetails into what President Trump wants to have for our country, I think there are some common areas. I talked to Steve Moore about what we can do on tax reform. But yet we must not mistake the fact that those Rust Belt states actually made a very defining choice to go with Donald Trump. And we need to make sure that we recognize that and work on that agenda.
You've got to be impressed, as I certainly was, that the OECD evaluating Trump's potential through his economic policies to stimulate growth. They're talking about doubling the rate of growth over the course by 2018. That's impressive, and it goes beyond, I think, any number of economists that could be put on a list and printed in a newspaper. I mean, that's a big deal.
Well, it's a huge deal, and when we start to look at that, that's what matters most to not only those folks up in Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania, but it matters in North Carolina as well. It's all about those jobs, and if we can get the GDP growth back to 4 to 4.5%, we're going to make a lot of different decisions, but we're also going to be able to see an economy that thrives once again as we make America great.
Sounds good to me, and I suspect just about everybody else. Congressman Mark Meadows, always good to have you with us. Thanks.
It's great to be with you. Thanks, Lou.
Appreciate it. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, do you believe the establishment is having far too great an influence on the Trump transition team? What do you think? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Police shot and killed the Somali man who attacked and injured 11 people at Ohio State University today. The suspect, 18-year-old Abdul Razak Ali Artan. He plowed his vehicle into a crowd of students on campus and then began attacking them with a butcher knife. Artan was a student at Ohio State, a permanent legal resident of the United States. The FBI is investigating whether the suspect had ties to terrorists overseas. My next guest says today's attack has all the hallmarks of homegrown terror. Joining me now, the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Zuhdi Jasser. And Zuhdi, good to have you with us. Why do you say this has all the hallmarks of homegrown terrorism?
It's not only homegrown, but it has the hallmarks of ISIS terror, Lou. Sadly, we see a refugee that began in Somalia with his family, went to Pakistan, another haven for jihadists, and then came to the United States, was part of initially showing some of this grievance narrative in the years leading up, where he had complained about the West being Islamophobic, had talked about not being able to pray, etc., and then used some of the classic ISIS-inspired motives and methods, which was to use a vehicle, as has happened in Nice,
right.
And the Dobbs magazine. The Dobbs magazine had called for the use of vehicular terror in the summer of 2016, and then in October, another ISIS magazine called Rumiya, after the city of Rome, had called for the use of machetes and stabbing of very soft targets on beaches and in crowds in universities and elsewhere. So this points to all of what we've already known, which is we have a foreign enemy in ISIS, and then domestic insurgencies that are being radicalized through Sharia-inspired state-type ideology that we need to look at the precursors and not just wait for them to be violent.
You know, just a bit of a departure. All of the reports of these Islamic, radical Islamic training camps in this country, what do you make of that?
Well, you know, it's not necessarily just camps per se. I would imagine those we're monitoring. But the issue is folks that are feeding into this grievance narrative that it's us as Muslims against the West, that somehow America is anti-Islam. All these exaggerated grievances are creating a mentality, a state of mind that is Islamist, that is separatist, where they don't embrace America, where they are starting to feed into this global jihadist, what I call Islamo-patriotism, where you take a kid that appeared to have been just a regular Somali immigrant, right, turned into basically a jihadist operative who went violent against the infidels and wanted to commit this heinous act.
And there is a mindlessness to this. This 18-year-old had been interviewed in the Ohio State Student newspaper, talked about he wasn't sure whether or not he could pray publicly. He started, as you say, fitting the grievance syndrome here. Yet it was Ohio State, the state of Ohio, where they've got one of the largest, if not the largest, concentration of Somali refugees. This country gives them refuge, and then they have the temerity, this young man and others a year ago, to attack in a terroristic manner. I mean, how do you break through that mindlessness?
Oh, you're exactly right, Lou. I mean, listen, the vast majority of American Muslims, Somali Americans love this country and are here because they can have freedom and express it in ways they can't in their mother countries anywhere. But yet the problem is we also, as an American Muslim community, need to stop the exaggerated grievances, need to stop and realize that the grievance narrative is the first steps in radicalization. And we need to realize that we have a Muslim problem that needs a Muslim solution. And just like you said, the magazines that are out there, the jihadi websites, are Salafist. The ideology is political Islam against the West, and we have to begin to reform. Our Muslim reform movement gets crickets from these Muslim organizations, all the while they're pushing out the grievance narrative instead of countering it with pro-American, anti-jihadist mantras.
And I want you to tell me whether you agree or not. And they're doing so clearly conscious and intent on what they are saying and doing in each instance.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they realize that the bottom line is the militants want to create chaos, have Americans fear and become isolationists because ISIS is getting squeezed in Syria and Iraq, and they want us out of there. And here domestically, the insurgency groups also want to separate Muslims out of the society rather than having us counter the ideas that radicalize them.
Zuhdi, always good to have you with us. Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Zuhdi Jasser.
You. Appreciate it, Lou.
In our online poll last week, we asked you, are you surprised at how quickly and how well the president-elect is making his choices for his administration? 74% of you say no. Now, that other 26% is just going to have to get used to a new way of doing business. Joining me now, Congressman Ryan Zinke, Member of the House Armed Services Committee, the congressman also spent 23 years as a U.S. Navy SEAL, a commander of SEAL Team 6. He also served as a commander of Joint Special Forces in Iraq. He is the author of this brand new book, and I want to hold it up for you because we recommend it highly, American Commander. And American Commander, we're delighted to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Lou.
First, Donald Trump's election and what it means to you.
You know, I think his election was more about not a mandate per se about conservatism, but a mandate about Americanism. I think America wants to see things done. Yeah. And Donald Trump, a billionaire, related to the plumber. He related to the man on the street, the single mom, the law enforcement that just wants to see America move forward. They want the same thing that most of us do: house, opportunity, law and order. And
a middle class that actually is growing and prospering instead of shrinking and being oppressed by administration after administration who've decided they know better than the people of this country. And that, to me, is the selling point for Donald Trump. He's restored the people's voice to the people's house.
I agree. And it was a pushback on the political elite. It's not working for either side. And so status quo is unacceptable. And